Hello and welcome to the FSF podcast. I am Tim. I am your host of this here nerdery, and we want to remind you that this show is a show made by nerds for nerds. So again, welcome to said nerdery. Our guest today is probably best known for her work on Friday the 13th as Pam, the final girl for that movie, but she's also been a scream queen for many, many years in other shows and other movies. There's the Once and Future Smash, Slasher Fest 85, I Spill Your Guts 2, Thunder Alley, and a whole host of TV show appearances and guest spots in the 1980s, throughout the 1980s. So very excited to welcome Melanie Kinnaman to the FSF podcast. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. We were talking before we started recording this, about meeting you at Monroe. You were at the Monroe Comic-Con as one of the featured stars, and I didn't get to sit in on the panel, but Jason from the Three Geeks podcast, and I believe it was John from the PVD cast ran that panel for us there at the Monroe Comic-Con. By the way, guys, Monroe Comic-Con every September in Monroe, Michigan. Check it out. It's a really cool little con, and it's a great for families and kids. So come on down. Have fun.
It was great. Got to meet some really cool people and made some new friends.
Absolutely. Yeah, Monroe's a great Comic-Con. We've been going there for 4 years now, every September, and I am thrilled every year to go again. I just have a blast. But the reason why I brought that up is because now I know that you talked a little bit about how you got into acting and all that stuff, but we're nerds, and so we do love a good origin story. So wondering if you can give us the origin story of Melanie Kinnaman and how you got into acting and how we got to where we're at.
I started when I was very young. I was a dancer. I actually started at the age of 5. And by the time I was 13, I started getting professional work as a dancer. I was a singer-dancer. And so all of my stuff was live stage theater. And I got the acting bug while doing that at a very young age. I'd say around 7 or 8. And I had idols, people that I really aspired to be like. My idol, people are shocked, is Dick Van Dyke, because he could do everything. And he was a great dancer and singer and actor. So I grew up really aspiring to be like him, Okay. So that's what I did. And I started getting work in New York City around 16, 17 years old.
Okay. So I was going to ask this one later, but I think I'm going to ask it right now. So you started off as a dancer. That was going to be one of the things I talked to you about, was that, clearly acting was not your only love. There was other things in there. You mentioned the dancing, you mentioned singing. And I also read somewhere, and I want to make sure this is true, because IMDb is kind of like the Wikipedia for Hollywood. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not.
Yes, it has a lot of stuff missing on me, and it has other things I don't know where they came from. So,
well, you're not the first to say that.
Yeah.
So every time when I talk to somebody, I'm like, yeah, I got this information from IMDb, unless I know it's the biography that they personally wrote.
Yeah, which I did. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, you have a biography on there. You might want to check that one out.
No, I did, but I didn't write it. I don't know how to get in there and write it. If I can figure it out, I will tell my story my way.
There you go. So, but you also mentioned that it also mentioned that you also did some modeling work as well.
Yeah, in New York.
All right, so,
yes.
Okay. So dancing, singing, acting, modeling. What is it about each one of those things that scratches your artistic itch differently? Because, we're all multifaceted in what we do and how we do things, but sometimes we lean into one thing more than the other because we identify with that. Was that the case for you? And
yes, the modeling came when I moved to New York City, only because of the things that I had done in the theater. Excuse me, as a dancer, and I had done a very popular commercial, Dr. Pepper commercial, where I was the lead character, singer, and I sang the jingle. I was the singer and dancer on the stage. It was a 1950s prom story. So I play Mary Lou, and I danced, like I said, and it was a huge production, and I got noticed from that. And so after doing that, and it started to air, I started getting calls for modeling jobs. because that wasn't really my aspiration. I'm not super tall and everything, but I started getting work from that. So that's how that happened. My original love is dancing, because that's how I started in the business,
Mhm.
singing and dancing. I did a lot of musical theater in New York. So that was my basic love and what drove me. But I wanted to be an actress all along. And believe it or not, dancing is acting, singing is acting. Okay. And quite frankly, if you're good at it, modeling is acting. Some of the best models, when you see the photo, they're not just standing there with nothing going on, they're acting. So, all the different things that I got to do in my profession were, for me, a creative, it fed my creativity, because I was able to bring the acting to all of it.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, that makes sense. We've
If
talked to
you
so many people.
if you look at some of the best modeling pictures, there's something going on. They're not just standing there. There are the ones that just stand there, but the ones that have, there's something going on. Those are the best shots.
I
Herb
can
Ritts
agree
was
with that.
great for that. Herb Ritts was a great photographer for that. Scavullo was great for that. He got something from the models. There was a backstory, you know?
Yeah. No, that honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Like I was saying, we've interviewed so many people on our show that aren't just, just an actor or just a dancer or
Mhm,
just a singer.
mhm.
There's usually if you've got one skill set, usually there's something else that trickles in from somewhere else.
Hopefully.
And yeah, yeah, and a lot of people have actually commented on something similar to what you said there about how these other things they're all closer
Mhm,
tied together than what many people give them credit for.
correct.
And I've never really thought about that with modeling. I'll be honest with you. I never crossed my mind that that could be part of that.
Right.
But singing and dancing totally makes sense to me, especially if
Mhm,
you're dancing um, in ballet or something like that, because
mhm.
you're telling a story with the
Telling a
dance.
story. Yes,
You know,
you're
um,
very right. Yes, a lot of people don't know that, but yes, you're acting.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, that to me makes a lot of sense. Um, And there's other forms of dancing that I also would include in storytelling, especially,
Mhm.
active dances like tap and things like that where
I did all of it. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, that to me just makes a whole lot of sense, and I just went yeah, but I've never thought about it with modeling, but that would make sense because, again, you're trying to emote some feeling, some
Something.
emotion, or
Yeah,
you're like you said, telling a story with what you're trying to
it's to
get the
sell.
person to do. Yeah,
Because
so
you don't want just a dead stick figure. You don't you need to see something going on in the eyes, right? It draws
sure.
you to the photo, and when it draws you to the photo and that model, it draws you to the product or whatever it
Yeah.
is they're selling, the clothing, the makeup, whatever it is they're selling. You'll be drawn to the product if there's something going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kinda like one of those light bulb moments for me, just bing, things
Mhm.
make more sense now. Uh,
And now you'll look at the pictures differently, maybe.
oh, absolutely, I will, for sure. And that's one of the things I love about these conversations I get to have with people is that I love having my perspective on things changed,
Yeah.
with different realizations and going, "Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense." And then you start looking at life and interactions and things differently, and this is one of those things where I will view things a little bit differently now,
Okay.
uh, 'cause yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so going back to the joy that is IMDb. Now, I was looking at your work resume and your work history on there, and according to IMDb, and I'll ask you to fill this in properly for me. That shows a pretty large gap for about 15 years in your work history.
I know, and I was working. There was a slight gap, but not that large, and that gap started, um, I don't know if it's a common story, but the story is out there, and I am writing a book, so it will be out there more, but many people know this. I went to an audition at Miramax and met Harvey Weinstein,
Okay.
and what ensued from that was horrific.
No, I'm
Um,
sorry.
I was attacked. He ripped my clothes off, but I'll jump to why there was a gap. So when I fought him off, not physically, but a little bit physically, but it was more verbal that this was not going to happen. And he
Right.
was verbally assaulting me and standing. He's a very big man, and he was blocking the door so I couldn't get out. And I just was very firm and said, I'm leaving. And he said, don't make this mistake, because if you make this mistake, and if you ever tell anybody, you'll never work again. And I said, of course, I'll never tell anybody. Well, that didn't matter, because I didn't. I told my agent when I got home, because I was in a state of shock when I got out of the
Yeah.
room, and I was half naked, and a long story, but I don't even remember driving myself home. That's how much shock I was in. But I had the wherewithal to call my agent and tell them what happened. And their first response was, you can never tell anybody. He's very powerful. You can never, you have to take this to your grave. And also they asked me what I had done to provoke it, which really made me angry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I assured them that nothing, I went in for an audition that they set me up on. I did not expect, I would never have gone. And it was an office, by the way. I did not go to a hotel room as some of the other poor girls, their situation. I went
Right.
to an office. I thought it was a legitimate thing. There was a secretary outside. Anyway, but I did tell my agent, and I said to my agent, I'd like to tell Screen Actors Guild, I'd like to tell the union, I want this on record. And they said, that's death. Don't ever do that. So the reason I'm telling you this part of the story is
Mhm.
I didn't tell anybody. I didn't report it at all, much against how I felt. And it still affected my career. He still made sure that I worked nowhere. But this is why I still have a love for Paramount. Paramount was the only studio that continued to call me in and cast me, which is why I did Cheers and some other shows. That was all Paramount.
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
this was all after Friday the 13th, by the way. This was all after I had done, the movie for Paramount. So I thought that this is great. I'll start getting auditions and things because I have some kind of collateral in
Mhm.
the business, if you know what I mean, that I've done something. Uh, whether you think it's a great movie or not, it was a lead character in a studio film,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Right. So whatever you thought of the film, I mean, I was not naive thinking it's Academy Award time or it's a great movie. I have respect for what it was, but the bottom line is I was a lead character in a studio film, and that's something.
That's
So
huge.
I
Yeah.
so I thought that this would be an impetus to get doors open for me. One of those doors audition was Harvey Weinstein, and he closed a big door. I did not know it was going to impact my life for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not over. I mean, I can talk about it now without crying. It really screwed up my life.
I can't even imagine.
But now
Yeah.
I'm able to talk about. I mean, it took years not to even be able to talk about it. I can't even tell you. I'd be interviewed, and that subject would be, because I was in my prime, and those were very important years.
Oh,
Those 10
sure.
years,
Yeah.
and so he screwed me literally.
He ripped the rug right out from underneath you.
Yeah, he did. So if you see a gap, it wasn't 15 years. I mean, I was working, but there is a gap where I wasn't. So I was doing theater, I was teaching dance, I was trying to, get things going. I was trying to do
Sure.
my own thing. I had a rock band. The name of the band was Bliss. I performed all over Los Angeles at the top clubs, Whiskey A Go Go,
Oh, cool.
Roxy, Troubadour. I was everywhere. I went to Europe with the band. So I was doing that in the interim because I figured he can't get me there. He can't keep me from working in clubs and maybe getting a record deal. So I did the music. And you know what? And I'm just thinking now, in hindsight, it was kind of a blessing because I would have never done the band. I would have never stepped into that Sunset Strip, Guns N' Roses territory, But
Sure.
I did. The name of the band was Bliss. We were more of a pop rock, kind of like Oasis, um, that kind of thing.
Well, now I did not know that aspect of the story, so now I gotta look up the band and check
Yeah,
out your
and I have stuff that I can put up. I'm trying to figure out how to get some of my old recordings on there. I did a demo tape for a record company, and we didn't get picked up, but I still have the tapes. So I'm trying to figure out how to get them so people at least can hear them on YouTube and Facebook and all of that. But yeah, because of what happened to me in acting
Mhm.
and that whole fiasco, I did get into the music scene. I had always kind of
Okay.
wanted to do it, but I didn't really have the impetus to do it because I was putting all my energy into, um,
Sure.
you know, after Friday the 13th. So, but anyway, in the 90s, mid to late 90s, we were the band called Bliss, and we were somewhat successful. We played everywhere.
Well, that's
So
a nice
that's not on IMDb. That's nowhere except for people that know my stuff, and that's what I filled my life with after Harvey Weinstein stopped my career.
okay. Well, that's a happier ending to it than I think most
Yeah.
people got. So I'm glad that you had a way to release your artistic side, and you found a way to maybe occupy your mind and things that were so
Yes.
you could work your way through that and get to a point where you could have acceptance for what happened. Not that you know what I mean by that, just so that
Yeah.
you could accept yourself and move on.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah,
And it was
that's
a
a
cool concept. I had some of the best I had guitars, 2 guitar players, bass, drums, and keyboards, and I got some of the people from the best bands in LA. I had people from LA Guns. I
oh
had
no,
people Oh, yeah, I had great backup people. So, it was me in the front, the female singer, and all these really hot, uh, rock and rollers, in their leather,
nice.
and, yeah, they had played with some great bands before they came with me, so
Okay. Yeah, seriously, I'm gonna have to. I was a my older brother when I was growing up was really big into the hair metal scene, and so LA
mhm,
Guns
mhm.
was part of the
Yeah,
repertoire of bands. So I'm gonna have to check it out. I you have made me become curious.
friends of
Um,
Julie Clark from Guns N' Roses,
oh
they
sure,
helped me.
yeah.
Yeah, they were in it with me. I'm trying to think of what bands you would know, the Hangmen, just a lot of bands that were doing really well in LA, and then they kinda
Okay.
disbanded, and I was just taking them all in. If I could get they would, I'd say, "Please come and join me," and they'd try me out, and say, "Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
sure.
cool."
No, that's a really cool story. I mean, it sucks the way that you got there, but I'm glad that you got there
Mhm.
and you were able to have that experience as something positive. So that's really cool. Okay. Um, so getting back into talking about your acting and things along those lines. So a few weeks back, we had Dee Wallace on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Another, yeah, Dee is an absolute sweetheart, and loved talking with her. And we talked about the title of being a scream queen because when you look up your name on the internet, scream queen is attached to your name quite often as well. So I asked her this question. I'd like to ask this question of you as well. What does it mean to you to be a scream queen?
Wow. First of all, when I was doing the movie, I didn't know I was a scream queen. I didn't know that term. I had never seen a Friday the 13th movie. So, to see that attached to me, Final Girl, I didn't even know what that meant. But so Final Girl and Scream Queen were new names attached to me, and it took some getting used to. And then I realized it was an honor, sort of,
Yeah.
because there aren't a lot of them, and it meant that you accomplished something in the horror genre, that you were accepted. I realize now I've been accepted by the horror community, to the
Oh, for
point
sure. Yeah.
where, yeah, I didn't know that, and to the point where I actually have a moniker. I'm a scream queen and a final girl. Wow. So yes, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But I
Absolutely.
didn't know it then. You know what the truth is? I didn't know for 15 years after Friday the 13th. I did not know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a
Yeah.
great feeling. I don't know what Dee said, but it was a great feeling. Um, and again, what it means to me is that I had some kind of impact, or I contributed something to the horror community, and I love the horror community, so it makes me feel good.
Yeah. Her answer was pretty similar to that because she talked about how it meant that she had done something where people had appreciated her work, and that she had done something that had like you said, an impact on other people.
Mhm.
And then she went on to talk about how the importance of the genre, because a lot of people I think, and I won't lie, I think for a long time I was probably one of the ones who just dismissed the genre as
Mhm.
it's just a
So
horror
did I.
movie.
So did I.
Yeah. Um, but and again, this is one of those instances where I talk to somebody and you kind of have your perspective on things changed a little bit. And she was talking about the importance of the genre and how it it causes people to uh, practice their fight or flight,
Mhm.
and and keeps them, and other reasons why that the horror genre was specifically important.
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought that was kind of neat, and so I like that answer, especially because I think that we want to take pride in everything we do, but it's also
Yeah.
important to get that type of feedback. And so for you to be able to have that title and people look at you and go, "Oh, yeah, that's Melanie. She was Pam in in Friday the 13th part 5."
Mhm.
Um, she was the
Yeah.
final girl. And that's a bigger deal than I think many people really realize it to be as well, to be the final girl in a movie.
Yeah, I didn't know, but yes, it is. It's interesting. I do shows around the country. That's how I met you, but I do them in Europe also. And here's the interesting thing. In America, for the most part, not across the board, but for the most part, they really revere and want to meet the killer from the franchise, Jason,
Mhm.
Michael Myers. They are enthralled with the killer and not so much the survivor. And they do love the victims and the different kills. But in Europe, they idolize the survivor and the final girl and then the killer. So it's an interesting thing how different it is.
Yeah, it is.
And like I said, I do shows in America, and I do them with Tom Morga, who I love, but he gets a lot more uh, attention, let's say, or I don't know if it's respect, than the final girl does. But in Europe, it's the opposite. I found that
That's
interesting.
that is interesting.
America
Yeah.
likes the killer. America likes the
I don't
I
want
don't
to say that says something, but
it does say a lot. I don't want to say too much because this is a happy podcast, but it's really in the last 3 or 4 years really kind of startled me and made me think about society. And I'm not putting down the
sure.
killers. I know that they're important to the whole story. They're the draw, but to make them more important or more yeah, more important than the final girl. I think the survivor is important. I think it's a great role model. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Some
Yeah.
people need it. Some people would like to look up to the final girl.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think that's because I think yeah, obviously, being an American and
Mhm.
growing up in America, I live in Michigan, so um, you know, co- all throughout my life, I don't think anybody ever said, "Oh man, did you see who the final girl was in that movie?" It was always, "Oh, did you see how Jason killed this person in that scene, or Freddy Krueger killed
Yep,
that person in
yep,
that scene, or
yep,
Michael Myers did this or whatever."
yep.
And the simple fact is, those people by those characters by their names. Very few I think in America, just this is just off
Yeah,
the top of my head. Very few right away would say, "Oh yeah, the final girl for that movie
yes,
was this person."
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in most of them, the killers have a mask on, so you really don't even know this actor that you're meeting, that you can't
Right?
wait to meet. It could be anybody, because he was wearing a mask, but
Yeah, that is a really interesting perspective on this whole genre for me, because yeah, I just growing up where I've grown up, that's always been killer specific, not final girl survivor specific,
no.
and that's kind of a neat juxtaposition on that whole thought process.
But there's a whole group when they come to the shows that are drawn to the final. It doesn't have to be me, any final girl. They're drawn to that, and they told me why. That when they were growing up and watching these films, they connected somehow with the final girl, and whatever they were going through in their life, and a lot of it was negative. They were being bullied, or they were coming out as gay and dealing with that. And they have told me that they are very, very connected with the final girl, and the final girl somehow gave them hope and courage to go back to school
Oh,
and deal
interesting.
with all this stuff. That was very interesting to me. That was been some of the most rewarding stuff when people come to meet me and they tell me their story of what they went through in their teens or adolescence, and that somehow Pam Roberts had some kind of impact, really makes me happy because I had no idea, you know.
No, that's really interesting because that's another thing where I would have never have made that connection between the
No,
final girl and that.
no,
Um, but yeah,
it
I
was a
mean,
happy.
looking at it now, I mean, you're able to survive this, you can survive that. Maybe, it's kind of a
Mhm.
logical leap. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but they all, especially the gay community, told me that they're all very connected to, let's say me, because they're talking about part five, but any of
Sure.
them, they're connected to the final girl and they look up to her because of their survival and thinking fast on her feet and realizing that she can overcome this and survive. And they somehow place that into their own reality or their bad childhood or their parents or the school. And they use that, and some of them,
Sure.
I don't know why, but they've told me they've seen it like 300 times
Oh,
because
wow.
yeah, it gave them, for me, it was like listening to music. I would listen to a song and it would change my feelings about whatever I was going through at that
Mhm.
time. And they used the movie, a horror movie of all things, to get them through the stuff they were going through. And a lot of it is not good. But I'm so happy. That's been the happiest thing that's come out of this for me, meaning the shows, to meet these fans that tell me these stories that are so dramatic and they have happy endings, and they claim it's because of Pam Roberts or Alice in part one. You know.
Mhm. That's very cool. One of the things, like again, having talked to so many different people on this show, one of the things I love to hear about are those stories where, somebody has come to the con and they've talked to somebody who they've either idolized or they in this instance the somebody who's been a final girl and they cling so tightly to that. To hear those stories and people uh being able to navigate through their life because of this thing. I you know um it's very touching, to me to be able to hear people's stories. I love knowing what makes people tick and why they
Mhm,
do the things they do and why,
mhm.
and so to hear that even though it's a genre that I may not have always appreciated throughout my life, to hear that this horror movie struck
I know.
them so much and it meant so much to them that they were able to push through some other craptastic thing in their
Mhm,
life.
mhm.
I
It's
think is
amazing,
outstanding.
isn't it? It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
I would never have known, some fan mail I was getting in the old days. Yeah, we get fan mail, actual letters, written paper, and they come in the mail. That's not anymore. It's all internet. But I would get fan letters that kind of touched some of that. But I
Okay.
really had no idea till I started doing conventions. And I was late to conventions. I didn't do them right away. I've only been doing them about 11 years now. But they were coming after me 20 something years ago to do them, you know.
Oh, that's cool. No, I'm glad that A, that you're doing the conventions, and B, that there are people who can identify with your characters and you're able to hear those stories. I think, like I said, I think it's always good to be able to get feedback on your work and have those hear those positive outcomes to the things that you've done because it makes you want to keep going. Even in this, when somebody tells me that they like an interview that I've done
Mhm.
or they, or something along those lines, it's okay, I'll admit there's that couple second of ego boost where you're like,
Mhm.
"Woohoo," but then after that, the appreciation for
Yeah.
whatever it is that they've gone through, why they were listening, or what they appreciated about it. So, all right. Um, all right, so clearly you've been around the Hollywood scene for a while, in, out, and around, whether it was in the clubs making music in Hollywood, or you were on stage as actor, you were whatever it may have been. So you have experience in this world.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to those who are up and coming who want to get into horror specifically?
Oh, into horror. I
Yeah,
thought you
into
meant.
the as an actor or an actress into horror specifically.
Mm. Well, don't go just for horror. In other words, hone whatever your talent is on any opportunity you have that comes your way. And so you try all different avenues to get to your final goal of what you think you want to do. Um, so you'll do a bunch of other stuff so that when the horror does come, you're ready. You're at your best to portray a great horror character. You can't just say, I just don't want to do horror. And that, I'm sure people are doing that. But my advice is to do everything. Learn everything you can about acting and performing, because then you'll be able to bring that fully to whatever role you get, and especially in horror, because in horror, you really need to have a whole gamut of emotion,
Hmm.
physical ability, um, and perseverance.
Okay. I think that's great advice. I think that if you're gonna do anything along those lines, I think that there's more to horror than just the horror, but you have
Mhm.
there's comedic parts, there's sad parts, there's
Everything,
high
everything.
emotion. You got to be
Mhm.
being well versed in all that is great advice.
You're right. That's it.
All right, one more question before our silly question. Melanie, I heard, or I shouldn't say I heard, I read
Mhm.
that in Jason Part 6 that Pam almost came back, and that was the rumor anyway, that that there was a rewrite and then she was taken out.
No,
So if
that's
that were ever to ever be the case where Pam were to come back, how quickly would you sign up for another Jason flick?
right away. And the real story is, when I got part 5, I was signed to do part 5 and part 6, because
Okay.
part 6 was going to pick up right where part 5 left off. That final shot of me looking out I was looking at a window, but you just see my face and he's behind me, right?
Hmm.
And that was the end of the film. That's where part 6 was going to pick up.
Okay.
We were getting ready. We had wrapped part 5. We had some months off, not long, like 2, 3 months, and they were sending me a script. And just as I got it, I got a call from my agent saying that Paramount has had to change things because John Shepherd does not want to do any more horror. And he and I were signed to do part 6. So when John said, I'm not doing this anymore, and he wouldn't do it, they decided they needed to change it. I said, I can still do it, get somebody else to do John's role. And
Right.
they said it won't work. So since that fell apart, Paramount decided that they were going to go back to the old formula and have Jason, which is why you have the new part 6 the way it was. But that's not the original part 6. That's not the way it was going to go.
Okay. Interesting. All right. All right. Final question for
Okay.
the final girl. Melanie Kinnaman, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Barney.
Fair enough. I will guarantee you that's the first time we've ever gotten that answer. Uh,
Why is it usually T-Rex or something?
T-Rex, Stegosaurus. Um, my co-host Kathleen, uh, she she has one with the thing's got like a little trumpet
Oh,
thing on top of his head, and I
what?
can't remember what that one's. It's a
Okay.
Cephalodophilus, no, acidophilus is a medicine. That's not
Yeah,
it.
it is. I take it.
Uh, so it's definitely not
That's
that.
Oh God, I wonder what that's called. Well, I guess if I Barney, but I guess Tyrannosaurus Rex. But I like the music of T Rex, so I will go with T Rex.
Okay, fair enough. I like it either way. I like your answer either way. Like I said, first time we've ever heard Barney, but I'm good with that.
Hey,
Okay,
I'm telling you the truth,
I
Barney.
love it. All right, Melanie, thank you so much for being on the FSF podcast today. Where can our listeners and viewers go to find out more about you, your work, what you've got coming up, anything along those lines?
I got a bunch of stuff coming up, so you
Awesome.
can keep in touch with me on Facebook, Melanie Kinnaman, just my name. Uh, on Instagram, I'm Screen Siren 5, and I do update all of that stuff when I have new stuff that I can talk about. So keep your eye on that. I am on X, Twitter, but I'm kind of not
Eh,
much with it.
Yeah.
I don't like the way it's going. So, but I am on there, and that's Melanie Kinnaman. So I have some events coming up. I have some movie projects coming up. So I will keep everybody posted on that. And I'll be in Europe this coming May. I'm in France, and in August I'm in Germany, and I'll be updating on that for all the European fans that may be watching this. So just keep an eye out. I'll keep you posted.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you. We'll make sure that we get all those put it down into our show description, the notes down below, so people can follow you and make sure that they're keeping up to tabs. And as a reminder, guys, if you haven't already, there should be something popping up on the screen right down there that reminds you to subscribe to our show as well, because that's the most important thing you can do to help our show continue to grow and get amazing guests like Melanie Kinnaman to come on the show and talk with us. So we want you guys to be able to remember or get notifications rather when these things come up, so you can have these funny moments to listen to. So please subscribe. It helps out more than I'll ever be able to tell you. And make sure that you go check out Melanie's work as well, because with everything she's got coming up, you're not going to want to miss out on any of the fun. So again, Melanie, thank you for being on the show.
And happy Halloween, everybody. I don't know if this airs on Halloween, but it is Halloween right now, which is very fitting that I'm talking to you on Halloween. Don't you think?
There you go. Yeah, I didn't realize that till last night. I was like, oh, I'm interviewing her on Halloween. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for watching the FSF podcast. Goodbye.
Copyright 2024 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.